Welcome back, Pedram, the urban monk, hanging out with Dan Moriarty, who's one of the most interesting guys you're going to meet, and you're about to meet him right now. Traditional herbalism, not the way guys like me did it, who was like, oh, this is interesting, I'm going to go study it, but we're talking generations deep through his Hungarian lineage. Mom, grandma, he grew up with this stuff, and it's very interesting what he's done. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Pedram, and thank everybody watching. It's really a great honor to be sitting here with you. I'm a big fan. So,
well, likewise. And by the way, this isn't like this guy's the man, okay? So if you want to know about tonic herbalism and adaptogens, this is going to happen right now. So welcome.
Thank you, Pedram. You know, how this goes is quite simple. You touched on it earlier, but nobody really wakes up one day and decides to be an herbalist because their mother's an herbalist. As a matter of fact, I was embarrassed of my mother. She was so different. You know, my friends made fun of her, and I was kind of wondered why she was so different. My grandmother didn't speak English, and you know, I think a lot of people that grow up in very strong ethnic households, they feel that. You know, whether it's Hispanic or any ethnic household, sometimes you're a little embarrassed of your parents. And when I was young, I admit I was. But notwithstanding, my mom was counted on and relied on by the people in our area. And her family settled in above Colima, above Manzanillo in Colima, Mexico, after the Second World War ended. And so my daughter is born in Mexico. She's a dual citizen. And my two brothers are born in Mexico. I was born in the United States. So my early life was spent traveling back and forth between this property down in Colima, Mexico, in this little town called Huixcolote, where there's a number of Hungarian people living there, by the way, and back to Point Loma, where I was raised. And so bottom line is my mom and her mother, and beyond that, were herbalists. But I never woke up and just said, I want to be an herbalist. It wasn't until I was living down in Mexico and surfing, and I had my girlfriend down there, and I was unfortunately stung by a very, very venomous creature called Centroides sculpturus. It's a scorpion that has high venom content. It got me behind the shoulder, and to make a long story short, or rather a short story short, you can't survive this if it gets you that close to the lungs. And I'm very sensitive in that area anyway. That's just genetic. My lungs are probably my weakest part of my body. So I couldn't breathe. And I was literally struggling to survive. My vision had shut down to like a small little circle. I couldn't see anything. My mouth felt numb. Novocaine is the closest thing I could imagine to an overdose of Novocaine. I just couldn't function. And everybody was panicking and freaking out. And this little Mexican fisherman who happened to be spending the night in our little surf camp ran off into the jungle, which we were right in the jungle, right to the ocean, runs off in the jungle, and a minute or two later, it seems like a very short time, he comes back with this little Huichol Indian, who are the local indigenous Indian people of the area. And this guy, I didn't see him come into the camp. The only time I saw him is when he was right in front of my face, handing me something, kind of pushing it into my mouth, and I was just hanging on by a thread. And somehow I was able to pour this hot liquid down my throat. And Pedram, there's no feeling or words that can describe the feeling of when you can take a deep breath, when it feels like the weight of the world is sitting on you. And the first breath I breathed in, I mean, everybody around me was relieved. They could see it. And this guy saved my life. And he couldn't even speak Spanish very well, let alone English. So I didn't see him anymore. He left that night. And later on, after I survived this thing, and I decided I wanted to go back and meet this guy. And I did. And still couldn't talk to him. He grabbed me by the arms, by the forearms, not by the hands. He just grabbed me by the forearms and stared into my eyes for quite a while, and then eventually smiled and let me go. And I'm trying to put this to words, but I was never the same person. I was going to get married to my girlfriend. Her name was Dana, and we were going to get married. And I was left with this, like, you know, what am I doing with my life here? You know, I didn't even know exactly what this guy had done to me, or if it was like a side effect of getting stung. I had no idea. My girlfriend's like, "What's wrong with you? You know, you're different. What's going on? You know." And it was just like my whole life was changed from that point. And I still didn't know I wanted to do herbs. I just knew that I had to do something. This guy didn't take a gift back from me or anything. He wouldn't take anything from me. But I was left with this deep, beyond thought feeling that I have to do something to pay this back.
And he paid it forward.
I had to do something. And I finally, I'm a kind of a slow guy, honestly. I'm not the fastest on certain things. And it took a while. And when I say a while, I mean about 5 years of traveling. I just had this like wanderlust just hit me. I just didn't know what to do. So I left. I went to Alaska, hitchhiking. I went all the way to Alaska, slowly, up to Alaska, and back down to Mexico to see my parents in the winter, and back to Alaska. I did this for years. And I started to notice the changes in the world, Pedram. I started seeing plants as they go through their cycle as you move north, and they finally drop off the map, and then a new plant appears, and you see that going, and then pretty soon they get smaller and smaller, and then until finally they drop off the map. And eventually you get to Alaska, and you see big trees, and as you go farther north, the trees drop off the map, and pretty soon the trees are only this big. They might be 200 years old, and they're 4 feet tall. And something started to kind of connect me to the earth. I had lost this connection, and I was starting to get it back. It took years to do this. I was living pretty much as a hermit up in the mountains, in the Talkeetna Mountains above Palmer near Hatcher Pass, hiking all over the mountains, and that's what I did. I got back to Mexico every winter when the snows hit. And my mom was a very patient person, and I finally told her, and I felt totally exposed more than I've ever been. I said, Mom, teach me. She goes, teach you? I said, well, teach me how to help people. I got to help somebody teach me what you know. And that, for me, that was a big moment because like I'd mentioned, I had always had a little funny feeling about my mom's ways, and she never drove a car. She didn't even have a driver's license. I mean, you would be embarrassed if your mother didn't drive, And so, I was, please, Mom, I need help. And so she's
How old were you at this time?
This was in about 1972. So I was 19 years old. And when I got bit, and then I went through these years I mentioned earlier, when I got bit was about 1972. I went through about 5 years of travel. And so when I got back, I was about 24. When I finally asked my mom, boom, help me out here, 24. And then she basically told me the bad news. Is that this is going to take a while. And this isn't something I can teach you like that, but I can teach you some criterion. So she taught me her Hungarian way of taking an herb and having 5 different categories. It's like a family secret, which she really showed me how to do this. Within the month, within the cycles of the month, to use yourself as an instrument to gauge the strength of an herb during the month and then during the year. And by the time you go through the month and through 12 months, you now have been able to put a value on each of these categories based on one herb. So basically what she's telling me is that it takes a year to learn an herb her way. And it didn't take me long to figure out, like, Mom, how long is it going to, how could I possibly learn an herb? It takes a year for every herb. She's like, well, you can't learn everything. You can't be an expert in everything. But whatever you pick, whatever area you pick, she goes, you have to be the best or the only. And that's Hungarian for saying being the best. Yeah. So that was really her thing. And so...
Question quickly. This Hungarian tradition, is it the same as like the Siberian tradition? Because there are very kind of well understood herbal traditions.
Yes.
There's shamanic traditions.
Yes.
And so like does it trace lineage to that area?
The lineages do trace because you remember Hungarian. Hungary was the summer capital of Genghis Khan. Okay, he made his capital in where Budapest sits right now. The Magyar language, the Magyars are Hungarian. They're an ancient, it's unrelated to possibly every other language on earth except there are some similarities to Finnish. But Hungarian is a strange language in that it basically explains thoughts, whole pictures are involved in their language. It's a very different language. And I am not a Hungarian speaker, but I have had my mom explain in certain ways this way they speak. And in the herbalism thing, honestly, as you well know, Pedram, and you're an expert at this also, energy, traditional Chinese medicine, you have yin and yang, right? Ayurveda, you balance the doshas. Shamanic medicine, which you mentioned, you're balancing the spirits above, the spirits below, the feelings of the air and the land, earth, wind, and fire, those type of things. Every healing modality, I don't care which one it is, if it's a natural healing modality, it encompasses the concept of energy. and what certain things do to our bodies. And I guess that scorpion pretty much created a giant schism in my being. I never got married to Dana. She was eternally upset about that for a while anyway. I finally met her later in life, but she forgave me. But I did find my calling. That was the beginning of Sunhorse. And then I realized what my mom was saying was true. I couldn't be an expert in everything. So now I have to find out what I want to focus on. And I have to say, Nikolai Lazarev, the Russian who coined the term adaptogens, was first to put the term adaptogen into use, and Israel Breckman and Mr. Panosian and Mr. Wickman and other people that are more contemporary. But I started to really take an interest in adaptogens because of his work and what they did. And I was a physical person. I mean, I'm a martial artist. I've done other things that really were competitive. And I knew that healing and being able to handle energy and being able to deal with the emotion of competition was a big thing for me. And I found that adaptogens, using my mom's technique one by one, I just was drawn to that area of herbalism.
So what is an adaptogen? Let's just make sure everyone's on the same page.
Okay, and that's a good question because adaptogens are a rare class of herbs. First of all, probably 1 out of every 5, and some people say up to even 8,000, somewhere between 1 out of every 5 to 8,000 beneficial botanicals can even be an adaptogen. And there's 3 definitive definitional parts. The first part is that they're non-toxic, which means for the most part, they're not going to hurt you. They have no real toxic effect. You can eat up to 9 grams per kilo, which means a 100 kilo person could eat 900 grams without a massive toxic event, notwithstanding allergies, of course, but toxicity in itself. And so non-toxic. The second thing, which has been found over time, and there's thousands of medical papers on this, is that adaptogens, and this is something that's so critical to everybody that's listening in the audience, is that adaptogens work at the cellular level. Now, somebody would say, well, doesn't everything work at the cellular level? And that would be a good question. But reality-wise, adaptogens, in some way, keep the messaging, keep the actual messaging that is coming from the outside world, and the fact that they are exposed to the elements, the environment, to the ozone. They see the planet as it really is. And in some fashion, they communicate this through the cell, into the mitochondria, through the mitochondrial membrane, and actually can cause our cells to reboot to an appropriate energy setting from the cellular level. Not an adrenal response from stimulants like any stimulant would be, but something much more deep and much more intrinsic. So adaptogens, that's the 3-part. Non-toxic, works at the cellular level, and the third part, amazingly, and probably one of the most beneficial parts, is that adaptogens are actually like a thermostat, so to speak, in your body. If a room is too hot, the thermostat will sense the temperature coming up, it'll turn the heat off. And if the room gets too cold, the thermostat senses the room is getting too cold, it turns the heat on. Well, that's exactly what adaptogens do. They help to bring us up or down, modulate our total endocrine and organ functions. So they're really amazing when you think of those 3 things. Non-toxic, they work at the cellular level, and they actually help harmonize, modulate, or help us achieve homeostasis or balance.
The dual directional capacity. So there's some famous ones, obviously. You know, ginseng, something
Yes.
Probably most people have heard. I mean, what are like maybe the first 5, 10 adaptogens that come to mind? That are
There's many. In Sunhorse, we use a number of them. But like you mentioned, ginseng, and honestly, it brings something to mind, and that is, you know, my journey started by someone giving me my life as a gift. And that's how I feel. And so with that in mind, I do want to, and you mentioned ginseng, so Pedram, I'd like to give you these American ginseng, if you don't mind. And I know you'll love that. Those are very good roots. Pedram, what you have in your hand there is known as Panax quinquefolius, and that's American ginseng. So that's ginseng from our continent here. Mm-hmm. And if you'll look at those roots, you'll notice that they're pretty thick. They have some unusual rugosities and nodules on them. Now this had a tail that went a little further, but the tail, well, I didn't take it off. It was taken off automatically by a person that knew that the tail didn't hold as much of the active ingredient. Now you're buying this by weight, and it's very expensive. So the tails are considered less value, so they take those off. So this is a high value root with very much ginsenicides, which is the actual active adaptogenic ingredient that has been identified in not just ginseng, but other plants also. So as the root is older, as it approaches, 4, 5, 6 years and older, and even 10 and 20, and there are ginseng roots out there that cost well more than gold because the value just keeps right on going. The older, and if it's wild, and there's a lot of factors, but this is an adaptogen that is used by the American natives, the native indigenous peoples in America. And it was used here for thousands of years. At the same time, really, that it was being used in China. The American Indians knew what this was. They traded it back and forth. It was one of the first exports that America ever sent out of this country was ginseng. They had boatloads of it, wild American ginseng. And believe it or not, Pedram, it's so highly valued that it's bought by Asian countries almost exclusively by them. It's very difficult.
Hardly get it here.
You can barely get it in America. I get it because I've spent years sourcing these things. This is yours. And by the way, you might have to saw that. It's so hard that a very fine tooth, like a hacksaw or something, you can saw that into little pieces. And one little sliver in hot water will give you a wonderful effect.
I want to stay on the subject for one quick second because it's a very interesting notion. So when you find, say, a blueberry bush up in the high altitudes and it's had to fight to survive.
Exactly.
And it's created all these phytonutrients and all these kind of chemical agents that we derive health benefits from. The struggle of that plant energetically and biochemically becomes much more nutritious for us. So these ginsenicides, the harder the ginseng has to work, the more value we get out of it.
Exactly. You are absolutely right, Pedram. And this communication from the natural world, and remember now, these plants, they're in the world. They don't move around. They're there, right? Okay. And they're exposed to the current level of ozone, the current level of pollution around the world, the current radioactive background that now, ever since, the nuclear age, they're exposed to everything. So what are they doing? The amazing aspect of a adaptogen is that it can transmit this information into our bodies. Physiologically, Pedram, and I know you'll agree with this, we're the same really as we were 10,000 years ago, which means we were meant to handle stress in short bursts, flight or fight, but not continuous, incipient stress continuously. And obviously the doctors, know this, but 3 out of 4 doctor visits are stress related, and yet stress is not even a disease, but we all experience it. So that communication of what that plant has had to go through to keep itself alive, and you can name any number of adaptogens, they'll all share this characteristic. It can transmit this information to our body cells and basically allow our bodies to reboot cellularly to an appropriate energy setting. Muscle takes energy to work. If your body has low mitochondrial energy, low energy output at the cellular level, your body cannot make tissue really. It has to make storage. It just goes, you know what? I'd like to make muscle, but muscle takes energy, and we have this mitochondrial issue. We're not putting out enough. There's not enough ATP transfers, not enough cellular energy. So what is your body going to do? It makes storage. That's called a metabolic problem. And these are things that adaptogens are so good at, is they can reset our internal thermostat. And science has borne this out.
Let's follow that out, because you said Lazaroff was looking at this.
Yes.
They didn't have American ginseng. I'm sure at that time it was hard to get the stuff.
No, they did not have American.
So then, in terms of the research on this, I just, because this is, the ancients love this.
Yes.
The science behind this is awesome. So what happened when Lazaroff started looking at this?
Okay. Remember they don't use rats in Russia.
Yep.
No rats here. People. And so he's like, and of course this is funded by the government. This is in the 1930s. This is like the late 30s, before the Second World War. So think of the time period. And the government is funding this. So they take 50 people and they give them ginseng. and they take 50 people and they give them no ginseng, and they send them off to the mines, or they're in a military capacity, and they work these guys like to the end. And then they go, biomarkers here. What?
Ginseng wins.
Oh yes. Not only does it win, but it wins in a big way. Yeah. So now the Russians say, okay, you need to find something in Russia that does this, because we don't control ginseng. We don't control Korea and China. We can't get it really. There's a war, the winds of war are blowing in the earth, and it's affected everybody. As I mentioned, my mom's parents had to move. Everybody moved, things were shifting. So the Russians are looking for this. Lazarev finds Siberian ginseng, Eleutheris senticosus. Amazing when you consider he didn't really know if there was anything out there like that. But he researches the endemic plants and the traditional uses of things, and finds this plant that grew up in Siberia that the natives up there were using. And sure enough, it had very similar, possibly even superior benefits in certain aspects, okay? So then the government goes, nice job, Nikolai, find another one. Well, I mean, you're like, okay, that should have been enough. Yeah. You and I would be done if we found something that good, right? But no, they're taskmasters. So out he goes again. Guess what? He finds another one. It's called Rhodiola rosea. And that is an amazing plant, once again adaptogenic. And they're going, well, excellent work, Nikolai. Find another one.
Keep going.
And he's like, okay, this is not, you don't say no to these people, because
right.
It's the government, right? And back in those days, it's just like not a no kind of thing. So he's looking around, and this was a difficult one for him. But he runs into another one. By listening to the endemic indigenous people, he finds a story that he follows up on, and it involved herbivores, a deer known as the marl deer. These marl deer were known to climb out of their normal habitat, clear up into the mountains up where they don't normally live, and dig down through the ground, through the muskeg, almost to the permafrost, and start digging up these certain roots. And the natives said, check it out. And then after they eat these roots, which is not even in their normal habitat, they're frisky, they're banging heads, and they make more baby deer. And he's like, okay. So he checks out. They actually called it marl, but it's really Raponticum carthamoides, which is an amazing plant, one of my favorites of all favorites. And it's some of the stuff that plant does is unequaled in the human experience. And I'm a big fan of it. So going back to what he did, taking it is scientific methodology, observation, experimentation. Remember, not using rats, using real people. So he was able to find an amazing array, considering the latitudes that Russia exists in. He found an amazing array. And I started following that. My mom kind of put me on to the right area of research, because you got to remember, back in the 70s and 80s, we didn't know anything about them here in America. Mm-hmm. So it was like a new thing. Ginseng we knew about, but that there was a whole class of plants like that. Then I started studying the different peoples, and I started realizing that what Lazarev did, and his associate, Mr. Israel Breckman, they were onto something. By watching these indigenous peoples, you could really tap into knowledge that the average modern person did not have. And so, for example, the Miao people in southern China. Now, there's a longevity pocket there that was discovered only recently, but I was aware of it because of research on longevity pockets. And they came up with a plant that they attributed this to. Now, they had a strange phenomenon. The plant, by the way, is called Gynostemma pentaphyllum, and it's in our product right here. It's one of the first things in there. There's 83 ginsenicides, which we mentioned earlier.
And it's a grass, right?
It is. It's a vine. It's a vine. Yeah, it's a vine. And it's amazing, because 83 ginsenicides in Gynostemma pentaphyllum, also known as jiaogulin. And so ginseng has 22 ginsenicides. This has 83. So what did that do to the people? Well, first of all, they lived longer. They actually had a term in their language. When the children would move away from their area and go into the big cities and live and work, they would come home 10 years later, and they would look older than their parents. So they had a term for that. And the parents, of course, were drinking the local poor people's tea, which was this Jougulin. They drank it every day, 3-4 times a day, gave it to their kids, gave it to everybody around. But the kids, when they moved away, it wasn't available anymore, and they didn't drink it. They come back, they look older than their parents. And it was a noticeable effect. So my research with Sunhorse Energy, our company, has simply been to really follow that train of thought. You know, like look into the various peoples. You know, looking into the Tuscarora Indians, who I met personally, and the Sioux, who were the great traders of ginseng, right? Then you look at the Tarahumara, which is an amazing thing. Identical genetic equals to the Pima in southwest United States. The Tarahumara of Upper Copper Canyon, Chihuahua, Mexico, are identical genetics to the Pima Indians.
And the difference being the Pima are exposed to white man's food. I'm not going to name off any major food chains here, but we all know what fast food is. But they're exposed to white people's food. They're out of their normal endemic harvesting of plants the way they used to do. But the Tarahumara have access to these very, very important adaptogenic as well as other botanicals. And they are the ultimate distance runners. When I was there years and years ago, the village record was 400 miles plus in 2 days. I'm like, running? And they're, yes, running. 400, you have to run. How are you going to get 400 miles in 2 days? That's like, what, 15 marathons or something like that? It's incredible. And I'm like, okay, who are you eating? Yeah.
Where is this guy? I got to see this guy. I'm thinking he's going to be like Superman. I mean, this guy has to look like Superman. No. Big surprise. Guy's like 60 years old, missing teeth. I'm like, no way. I'm like, that's him?
That's your champion, yeah.
He's the champion? They're like, yep. And it was amazing.
So in Born to Run, great book about about Tarahumara, they talked about this kind of like soupy corn-based porridge that they were having.
Exactly.
What are the adaptogens that these guys are taking?
I will tell you one that you will love. It's called Osha. Osha, it grows all over North America. It even grows in Asia and even in Europe. And it's an amazing plant. It's harvested strictly by Indians, as far as I know. It's very difficult to obtain, but it has this incredible addition to their diet. You're right, the corn is, of course, carbohydrate. You obviously need sugar, blood sugar, and you got to keep running, right? And they would even drink it fermented. They'd be kind of, had a small buzz going, I mean, they weren't obviously drunk, but, it did have an effect. But all the runners, the Indian tribes, you got to remember, they communicated on foot before horses came. But basically they had trade routes, and Osha was known with all the native cultures. They would eat this and run and run and run. And you get like lots of saliva. You can spit, you can run 15 miles and spit no problem.
And not stopping for water.
No, your body, it's just like this moistness, this like lubrication. And remember I mentioned my lungs? I have a weakness in my lungs. It's just genetic, but I use Osha. I use it every day, and I love it. And I run mountains. I run hills. So along with Mona, we run up in the hills, and we do 3 miles of just strictly hills. And my jiu-jitsu students, when they're going to train for competition, I'm 62 years old. So I'm like, and these guys are young, up-and-coming students of mine, and I'm like, okay, guys, you really want to compete? Okay, you got to hang. So we run hills. We run the top of the hills. We whip off 2 sets of 25 push-ups. We run to the next top of the hill, whip off 2 more sets of 25 push-ups, run to the next hill, and they are gassed. They're like, oh my God, Sensei, this is tough stuff. But that's what you have to do. But the Osha, without the Osha, with or without, it's an amazing difference. I mean, oh my God. I mean, you're blowing chunks without Osha. With Osha, just cruise.
And that's the thing about the Tarahumara. They live in a very hostile environment. It is hot as hell.
Incredible.
Very little water.
Yes.
Not a place that, they were driven there because of the conquistadors and all the kind of like political crap that
moved.
Yeah. So they live in a rugged area with very little water, and they're running 400 miles. They're champions running 400 miles.
The average girl, you could point to anybody in the village, they play a game that the course is 60 miles. They kick this ball for 60 miles back and forth until days later, somebody actually kicks this ball across one of the goals. But they have to camp. And they're like, they're eating, and hey, Pedro just took off with the ball like a half hour ago. They run him down, beat him up, take the ball, start kicking it back. This goes on and on and on. It could go for 2, 3 days, 4 days, whatever it takes, until somebody eventually kicks this ball over the goal. And the women are running along, and they're making camps here and there, and I mean, it's just like, it's an amazing culture. And yet, go back to the Pima, genetically identical. I mean, anybody will tell you that. And look at them. They have all the cardiovascular disease, the diabetes, the obesity. What is going on here? It's not genetic. And so these are the things that I started to see. And so when I was working with the beginnings of Sunhorse, and I decided to put together not an endemic formula, I decided to put together a global formula, because we're global people. I'm a pilot. You've flown on airplanes. Everybody's flown on airplanes. You can jump on a plane and fly to the Philippines, and 16 hours you're there. So we need something that's not just endemic. And so I decided to take this a step further. Now, Pedram, if you take maca, like let's say you take maca that's grown about 11,000 feet or better, and you take a soil sample, which is the soil that the plant is actually grown in, and you move it to a different part of the world, and you take it up to 11,000 feet, wherever that is, and you grow it. Does that plant have the same effect on your body as it did when it was in Peru at 11,000 feet? I wonder why. Because it has the same soil, it's at the same altitude. Something was different. And I hope our audience, we don't lose them here, but if you want to, I will explain something.
No, this is the sauce. Because look, up to where we're coming, like you could read a book and be like, okay, adaptogens do this, adaptogens do that. This is why I love this gentleman, is now we're getting into the real interesting intricacies of how to phase, how to pressure cook, and how to look at these differently based on the time stamp and the place stamp in the universe, which is what the ancients knew, but they're not found in my Chinese medicine textbooks. And this is the stuff that's fascinating to me. So please do, and if he loses you, we'll explain it later.
Yeah, just please ask me if anything appears not easy understood. Being a pilot, I've used aviation charts. And there's lines on these charts, they're called isogonic lines. Now, iso means the same, and they're lines of equal magnetism as they occur on the Earth. And these lines aren't straight. They're not like longitude lines. These wander all over the place. And they have the same magnetic values as you trace this line out on the Earth based on magnetism, as the Earth is a giant magnet. And that got me thinking. I go, well, why does the plant have a different effect? And remember, my mom said it took a year to learn an herb, and then here all of a sudden you move the herb and you grow it in a different place. You get a completely different reading on this quantification process I mentioned earlier. And I'm like, wait a minute, there's something missing here. Something's not explained yet. And I started researching deeper, and I found out that a fellow by the name of Schumann had discovered, for example, that the Earth has an emanation. It's called the Schumann wave. This wave is identical almost, is 7.83 hertz, to our alpha brain waves, right? And that we need this connection. And how do we know we need this connection? Is that every spaceship with an astronaut on it has an emitter that broadcasts at 7.83 hertz. Otherwise, they do not do well mentally.
They're nuts.
They go nuts. The mission will fail. So now that's pretty good proof. So now I'm thinking, wait a minute, something's missing here. We cannot get rid of, Pedram, we're not going to get rid of our cell phones. We're not going to turn off these lights. We're not going to go back to the dark ages. This non-ionic radiation is interfering with us. We need to adapt to the world that we have created. Why are we having so much trouble? Here's why. Because everything we're doing is interfering with the connectivity and the resonance that we need to be healthy. The energetic aspects of these other healing modalities, they understood this. But as I was getting a global perspective on this, I realized that there was something that I needed to do with my formula, that I needed to balance this formula, and I need to make it so strong that like Bose, the company has this noise canceling headset, which if you're a pilot, every pilot knows, they're great. They don't actually block sound. What they do is they add another frequency which cancels the actual noise vibration, the actual noise signature of the sound until you hear a clear sound. It's called a noise canceling headset. So I'm like, wait a minute. If I was carefully quantifying things like my mom taught me to do, and I get this emanation that obviously we need to connect with. We can't get rid of the interference. So what we need is to add a strong frequency that in effect is like the noise canceling headset that cancels out or at least mollifies what's interfering with our bodies. Our pineal gland not releasing the proper hormones at the correct time. We're just not healing. So I put on the back of the box here, I'll read it for you because I just want you to read this. It says, like the Schumann resonance wave that travels around the Earth 7.83 times per second, Sunhorse has named its globally sourced and carefully crafted adaptogenic formulas global resonance formulation. This is really what we're all about. And so to draw attention to the amazing benefits of our highly soluble, bioavailable, and bioactive formulas. And this, without going into detail, gets people interested in understanding the energetic values and why plants are different in different places, even if you take the same soil and grow them at the same altitudes. Those isogonic lines are real. You fly, you set your magnetic compass, has to be adjusted for those things. Our bodies feel these things. Adaptogenic herbs, as a class of herbs, Pedram, I believe hold the key to such a better, more healthy, vibrant life that I've happily devoted my life to getting them out to the world because I really feel, Pedram, that they are the one thing, the self-help world, there's billions of dollars spent on self-help, right? The most effective, inexpensive, and absolutely, incredible thing that a person can do is to help their cells. Yep. Not self-help, cell help. Awesome. Okay, we're cells. That's what we are. So if we help our cells, our body is like a general contractor. It's rebuilding us every day. Now think about this, Pedram. If we hire a general contractor, we check his references. He's a great guy, built a lot of houses. Good. He shows up on a bicycle. Okay, maybe he's a healthy guy. And you wait a little while. Where's your truck? You go, I don't got a truck. Okay, well, where's your helpers? Well, I don't got any helpers. Okay, well, where are your tools? Well, no tools. Well, okay, well, when are the materials are coming? Well, no, you got me. You're like, wait a minute. I checked your references. He goes, no, I know how to build a house. You check, I'm very knowledgeable. I've built a lot of houses. Okay, what's wrong with this picture? Obviously, that house isn't going to get built. Mm-hmm. But if you give the guy a truck, tools, helpers, and material, and the knowledge he has, there will be your house. Mm-hmm. So our body's the general contractor. And these elements that we're discussing, the energy, the resonance with the planet, the adaptogenic herbs that work at the cellular level. If we don't work at the cellular level, imagine our life as a pyramid. Mm-hmm. Everything's little blocks. You pull a block out here, you put a block in there. Did the pyramid get any higher? What if you took 3 blocks out and put them back in? Does the pyramid get any higher? Mm-hmm. No. So we cannot effectively make a big difference in our health until we deal with the base. Now, if we take a row of blocks here and put them on the bottom of the pyramid, did the pyramid get higher? Yes, it did, because we're dealing with the foundation, and that's what we do.
Okay, so let me try to understand this a little better, because we're talking about curving magnetic lines and things that are happening differently, right? Yeah. Which is fascinating. It's fascinating. I want to make sure that I grasp this. Okay. So when we're doing the noise canceling of the earth frequency so that this stuff can get delivered to the cells, are we talking about using other botanical agents to deal with, say, the limbic system and all sorts of things, so that then we have a clear path for the delivery of this to the cells? Help me understand how we're canceling out this vibration.
I will tell you. Yeah. First of all, we're not canceling out something from the earth, really. What we're canceling out is what man has done with there's an infinite number of frequencies. 7.83 hertz is, we can only hear to 20. It's much lower than what we can hear, right? So
we feel it in the ocean.
We can feel it in the ocean, right? And think about it. When most people have time off, where do they go? They go into nature. Mm-hmm. What do they sometimes do? Sometimes they take off their shoes and they stand in the water, they stand on the mountains. And what are they doing? They're enjoying what? They're enjoying the natural world. Why is it so impressive? Why is it so important? Why do we always want to go to Fiji or somewhere? Because we need that connection with the earth. We need to not be disconnected, and we need less of this non-ionic radiation and interference. So by adding a very powerful formula that's designed to synergistically apply the momentum and direction that adaptogens do, because the research has shown that adaptogens work at the cellular level. That's known research. And so by putting together a very strong, powerful, and this is key, everything that is soluble, very soluble, our bodies are mostly water, by extension, parallel track, would be more bioavailable. If it's insoluble, it's not that bioavailable. Okay, this is a formulating thing. So solubility, bioavailability, and then bioactivity are connected. They're like a three-way railroad track, a three-track thing. Soluble, bioavailable, bioactive.
Now, how do you assure that in terms of formulation?
Testing.
Okay, so sourcing,
lots of testing.
Sourcing, testing, and
yes.
your delivery mechanism,
The
right?
system of
so
delivery.
we're not talking about, you're not taking a tablet of ground up ginseng, which is hilarious to me, right? Because traditional Chinese herbalism builds teas, right?
I don't want to talk about product here. It's about the class of herbs, but I do want to show you something if you allow me to.
Yeah, please.
This is, and I'll just do it right here. There's another element.
Are we taking shots?
I don't know if you're taking shots or not, but this is a liquid. And, and the reason I go with a liquid, and there's a little tiny mark, 3.3 milliliters. But the reason I'm showing you this is that this is a month's supply of active ingredients. Now, when you go to, let's say you go to a Chinese herbalist and you get a prescription, what does that prescription look like when you get it?
A bag full of barks and twigs and roots and stuff like that.
And how much does it weigh, approximately?
A few ounces.
Ounces,
yeah.
Right? It could weigh 100 grams because of 28 grams to the ounce, right? Could easily weigh 100 grams, right? 100 grams is 100,000 milligrams. Now, when you go to a vitamin store and you buy some vitamins, how many milligrams are in a capsule, approximately?
25, 50.
25, 50, 100. What if you even got 500? You think you're getting a deal. 500 milligrams. So why, when we go to a traditional Chinese medicine person, does he give us 100,000 milligrams and we go to a drugstore and we get 500 milligrams? It's called effective dose. And see, they get results because the body needs a certain amount of it. It's called your minimum effective level dose. So in this formula, and I'm just going to open this up so people can, if they want to look at the consistency of this stuff, there's more than a dozen herbs in this. And you just, and you can taste this. I would recommend it with water, but right there, that is all you need in your day, because it's super concentrated. And it is important that, now, because we're in a fast-paced world, we're not going to eat ounces of herbs. And then the drugstores, they have very easy to take things. It's a gel cap or a cap or a caplet or a tablet or whatever. It's easy to take, right? But and we're used to that. We're not going to go back. But what we do need is we need those effective levels. We need it to be soluble. We need it to be bioavailable and bioactive. So my whole formulation is, aside from the energetic medicine, which I think we might have lost some people on that one, and that's okay, because I don't expect people to just believe that right off the bat. But I've spent 40 years checking this out, and I will guarantee you that there is solid, maybe not scientifically formulated papers on this subject yet, but I guarantee you if people look into this, they will discover that this is correct. But this little bit of very dense active ingredient is over a dozen herbs. And so mix that with a little water and you can drink it. It's just that simple. And then your body, because it is soluble and it is bioavailable and it's bioactive, you're going to feel it. You're going to notice it. And that's what we need in our lives. So if someone was to say, well, I want adaptogens, well, I would say make sure that the formula is soluble, make sure that it is very, very bioavailable and bioactive, and then, also, the sourcing is, our company spends so much time on sourcing and things, so all those things are important. But really, the class of herbs as adaptogens is so beneficial. I would invite all the listeners here to, we call it the Sunhorse Challenge, but I can call it the adaptogenic challenge right now. And when we're out there talking about our company or anything like that, we'll say the Sunhorse Challenge, but it's quite simple. Day one, before you start, get in front of a mirror. Take a picture of yourself. Sounds crazy, but do it. And then 30 days later, after taking this every day, or the equivalent of whatever formula you find that you like, every day, 30 days later, take another picture, and then look at them. And if you do not see with your own eyes some differences, okay, now, and we say the Sunhorse Challenge because we invite our people to do that. If they don't see a difference, if they don't feel that was money well spent, money back, no questions asked. Absolutely. I'm so convinced that these type of herbs, this class of herbs could benefit humanity in such a way.
Children, old people, anybody?
Good point. Children below adolescent ages, in indigenous cultures, yes, they do take adaptogens. They're endemic adaptogens. But you have to remember, we're a very modern culture, and we have lots of issues, between, the FDA and legal issues and things like that. So we don't recommend below adolescent unless there's a real good reason. There's some solid reasons, like, for example, if a child has hyperactivity syndrome or attention deficit disorder, things like that. It's been proven and shown, and I won't go into the papers, but I invite all of our listeners to begin the journey of learning. Go to the internet for sure, look it up, and you will find a lot of information on how adaptogens have helped children that have these issues stay off of very powerful medications like Adderall and things like that. Not to say they're bad in all cases, but if you can do it in a natural way, it's a good thing. I think most of our listeners would agree. And so children can benefit, but pregnant women shouldn't take it because the babies haven't developed they don't have their microbiome established, they don't have their immune system really established. So really just stay away from that. But a young person under certain conditions, I would say go to your naturopath, go to your functional medicine person, whoever you use, and I would highly recommend you find somebody you like, and I would tell them what the issue is, and please, you can ask your doctor, functional medicine person, I would like to, please, if it's okay, try these adaptogens with my child. And they will agree in most cases. And so...
Question, the longevity village in China, were the kids drinking the Gynostemma tea?
The kids did drink it. Everybody drank it. But that's what I'm trying to tell you, that in endemic cultures, in indigenous cultures, and by the way, I was in Brazil. I have to tell you this little story. It's fantastic. I am a bugophobe after getting almost killed by, and I mean, anybody who's known me has known that I've almost been killed a couple times by bugs. I got bit by a black widow spider, about wiped me out. I don't know what the last spider got. Bugs and me just don't get along. And here I am down in South America.
Bugs are driving you to be a better herbalist.
Maybe, but it's my nemesis, right?
Yep.
So I'm in the jungle trying to learn more about, but I'm mortified of bugs. So I mean, I'm wearing, long sleeve, everything buttoned down, and on top of that, malaria scares me to death, dengue scares me to death. They didn't know about Zika when I was down there, but I'm eating malaria pills like every day. And I'm looking at these guys, the Yanomami and the Jagua people who I studied down in Brazil, and I'm like, they don't wear any clothes, hardly at all. They're getting they're getting bit by mosquitoes as I'm watching. I'm like, they're not landing on them, they're landing right on them and stinging them. I'm like, okay, how come they don't get malaria? Why am I taking all these malaria pills? So I try to give them a malaria pill, they laughed at me. They don't need it. And so my guides, I'm like, why don't these guys, why don't they get malaria? Why are we worried about it? He goes, oh, they just don't get it. I said, that's impossible. It's a blood parasite. If you get Anopheles mosquito gets you, or a tiger mosquito, you're gonna get it. No, they don't get it. And so I'm like, okay, this is interesting. Why don't they get it? So I decided to look into that a little bit. And I was trying to play with my malaria pills with them. They wouldn't take them. Finally, I'm trying to what is your malaria? You give me something. If you don't want my malaria pills, what are you taking? They walked me off into the jungle. The next thing you know, I'm looking at some kind of a plant that I had never seen before, very bitter. It was approaching quinine in bitterness, and it was an amazing plant. It's called Erythroxylum vacinifolium, and in their language, what gives power to the people? Erythroxylum vacinifolium, what gives power to the people? That is their malaria medicine. And so I'm interested to find out more. So I put some, I check it out, I found out what the plant was. And as it turns out, they do get malaria. They just don't get the symptoms. They have the blood parasite, but their body has adapted to not show the classic malaria symptom. They just don't get it. And so the guide was saying they just don't get it. Well, they do get it. They get it, but they're not reacting to it like we do.
Because they're stronger, they're more resilient, they're more adapted.
Yes, their microbiome is incredible. They have this huge, diverse microbiome in their gut, which is the foundation of our health, like our second brain. And then they're also accessing these herbs that they have found over thousands of years that work. So it's so interesting. Obviously, time is a constraint, but I just invite everybody to look into these adaptogens for themselves. Sunhorse Energy is a company that is built on and around adaptogens as being a delivery system as well as a formulation method. This is something you might find interesting. I learned that adaptogens, because of their access to the cell, it's almost like a propellant. I can't think of a better way to explain it, but if you were to think of a spaceship or a spacecraft, it has a booster. It breaks through gravity, it overcomes the force of gravity, and it finally gets up there, and then you got the payload, which is much smaller, of course. And in some of our formulas, I've used the adaptogenic propellant aspect of the cellular access to actually propel other herbs that are more specific, like women's specific herbs and like men's specific herbs for hormone balance and things. And I think it's a wonderful way for people to learn what can really work, to how their body works, the fact that our cells are very important, and the fact that these herbs can actually access that very basic mechanism in our physiology. I think it's tremendously important. And it's so nice that you've invited me to talk about this on your show to your listeners. And
I love it. I love it. I'm a big fan of the work. Dr. Tom O'Brien, who's a good buddy of yours, introduced me to it. And look, I've been around tonic herbs for 20-something years.
Absolutely.
And I was with Ron Teagarden. I did a bunch of things back in the day, and I've been chewing on ginseng roots since I learned about it. Mm-hmm. There's something different about what you're doing, and that's why I invited you here, is because the way you've set up the delivery mechanism, the way that you're sourcing, there's a quantifiable and qualifiable difference in getting the herbs done right, and you're doing it. So I just, and I don't know what the hell you're doing in that laboratory, but it's working. And so keep it up. I mean, I've seen results with dogs and with horses and like people. I've been tracking this, and that's why you're here, because you're nailing it. And so keep up the good work with it.
Well, Pedram, it's definitely a great honor to be here with you and to hear what you say. And and this is our company philosophy, but it's definitely my philosophy, is that that commission or that feeling that I got when that little fella finally got to me. My mom didn't do it. I would not be an herbalist. I would have never got to Sunhorse. That little Huichol fellow is what did it for me. And I mean, it took me a while to figure out what was going on there. But honestly, you're in the same boat as I'm at. We all share this vision. You and I both, Pedram, is to help people. Mm-hmm. You see, that's what it's all about. And not the money part of this thing and the finances. That's not my forte. I'm not good at all that stuff, but I'm a good formulator, and my vision is for everybody to reconnect and establish that resonance with the planet, with their family, with their people around them. I mean, you have to ask yourself, we can't get rid of the stress, but what if we could get rid of the negative effects of stress, you see? So what kind of person would you or me or anybody be if we could take away the negative effects of stress? Would our parents, would our wives, would our children even recognize us if the stress was gone, the effects of stress? So that's what I see with adaptogens. I see people becoming more of themselves, you know, like, and I mean, even my perceptions are changing now. When I look at people, I go, man, you know, 3 months on adaptogens is going to be so different. I don't see them how they are now. I kind of see them what they could be. You know, it's just kind of interesting as time has rolled by, I actually look like that. That I'm looking at people like that, and I know it works. It keeps me going every day, and that's really what I'm all about. I want people to understand that you know, stress isn't going to go away. It's here, guys. It ain't going away. And to try to eliminate stress out of our lives, you know, that's kind of hard to do. But to be able to handle it, and from a cellular level to where finally it's just not a big issue. You know, I like to tell people this: however our lives are, and whatever place we are, we don't want to just survive. We want to adapt, and we want to thrive. Then we're happy. We've got things to share. But if we're just so overwhelmed with the daily stress of life, then we can't really be all we could be. We can't help our families and our people around us in the ways that we should. And I think that's the value of adaptogens. That's the gift that, you know, because of my background and when I think back about it, you know, nothing's accidental in the world out there really as far as that goes. And I really believe that, you know, this is a gift from the native natural forces and peoples of the planet to the modern world because, you know, Pedram, we need them, but they also need us. Yeah. We need to have this interchange where they have to understand how valuable they are so that their biomes will remain intact, so that their cultures can remain intact, so that we can learn more from them. Yeah. You know, that's my real mission. Sunhorse is about, yes, getting out adaptogens to everybody, but I really, really want to go back and see all the peoples that over 40 years, I mean, some of them won't be there, but the people themselves may not be there, but the cultures will be there. And I want them to see Sunhorse. I want them to see where those herbs that they're growing are going. I want them to see us here in the modern world, appreciating them. I want them to know. Honestly, Pedram, I would like to load up the Yanomami people, some of their head people and leaders, in a bus and take them to the favela in Rio de Janeiro, one of the worst favelas I've ever seen. And I want to show them where they will be living if they sell their jungle. This is where you're going to go. This is where your kids are going to play, in the streets, right here, with this dirty water and the terrible crime around you. If you sell your jungle for a motorcycle or a cell phone or a few measly bucks, this is where you will be forever. You will never get back to the jungle.
Instead of holding it down for humanity.
I want to do that. I want there to be, because if there's not an interchange, if we don't have a way to close the circuit, we have to have a circle. We have to have a closed circuit. It's just like anything. It's like electrical. So honest to goodness, people, we need their stuff that they have, that they've learned about for thousands of years. They need us. We're all on the planet together. And I think that, in a nutshell, is what I want people to know about what we do.
Listen, I'm a big fan of what you do. Stress isn't going away. And just for our audience, the things we could do against stress is physiological, cellular, which is what we're talking about here, and all the stuff I've been teaching, like meditation and Qigong and all these things. But we need a force field against stress, because stress is the modern world. And this right here, this beautiful ancient gift from nature that brings us back to the cellular wisdom of the frequency of the earth, the Schumann resonance, all these things that we know keep us sane and keep us healthy are found in the botanicals. And you are holding it down, my friend. Thank you. Thanks for being on the show, and I wish you the best, and I highly recommend his stuff.
Thank you so much, Pedram. It's been a great pleasure. Thanks everybody for watching.
I hope you enjoyed it. I am all about these herbs right now. I'm taking them every single day. I feel better. This is amazing stuff because it signals your DNA, it signals your cells to get back in harmony with nature, and we could all use a little bit of that. It's a big part of the Urban Monk Gestalt. I am a big fan of what's happening around Dan's work, and I highly recommend trying it. He is a very, very potent force in this space, and he's not peddling BS. There's a lot of people that are saying you're getting what you're getting, and they're just trying to sell stuff. I love this guy because he's like a mad scientist almost, and he's just all about excellence. So take Tonic herbs, implement them in your life, be better, have more energy, step into the Urban Monk. I'll see you next week.